Shopify Masters is powered by Shopify, the easiest way to sell online, in person, and anywhere in between. To get an extended 30-day trial, visit shopify.com/masters.
If their reaction, smells like somebody who's not believing it and not understanding it, then we'll walk the other way.
Hey, my name is Felix. I'm the host of Shopify Masters. Each week, we learn the keys to success from e-commerce experts and entrepreneurs like you. In this episode, you'll learn how to test your product idea with a panel study, how to get beautiful packaging designed and produced, and how to work with YouTube influencers. Today, I'm joined by Ben Weeder from Chassis. Chassis is the first and only premium men's care line specifically formulated for better performance, quotes, down there, unquote, keeping guys fresh, dry, and friction-free all day long. And was started in 2015 and based out of Tampa Bay, Florida. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, thanks, Felix. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so tell us more about this tagline for down there. I think it's really funny. Caught my eye for sure. Whose idea was this?
Well, Man Care for Down There is one of my partners, actually. So first of all, our name Chassis. If you're not a car guy, you may be wondering where the heck did that come from? Is it French? No. Chassis is like the undercarriage of a car. So it's a kind of a nice way of describing what we did. The folks that are car guys love our name. They think it's really quite funny. But, really our idea is that we wanted to be the first and only premium line dedicated for better performance down there when it comes to sweat, odor, chafing, overall comfort. These are problems that guys have. Guys we're sweaty, we're athletic in some cases. Some cases we might be overweight, we're hairy. There's a lot of things that are going on down there, and for literally generations, guys had just been using baby powder or quote unquote medicated powder, which provided some effect, but we had an idea that there could be a better way to do this, and that was the whole goal with our product.
Got it. So, speaking of the name, and for folks out there, it's spelled CHASSIS. Was that an issue where you ran into where people wanted to learn more about your product? They couldn't look it up. Like how difficult did this make it for you?
It's kind of funny. I mean, I think that, one thing we have realized is that for better or worse, guys, which of course our product is targeted for men, are becoming less and less into cars. So while somebody in their 50s or 60s, of course they know what a chassis is, it's highly likely that somebody in their 20s may not know what a chassis is, and it may take them a minute to figure this out. So we've seen a little bit of a gap there. But what's interesting is that, the people who think it's just a French name or just, a made-up name or whatever, in either case, it has not been a problem. In fact, one of my partners feels that the mystery of the name for certain people might actually be a draw. So, in either event, it's something that we're quite proud of. And I think that when you're a niche brand like we are, I believe it's best to just, say what you do, so we've got a great name and our tagline is very descriptive. There's no wondering what it is that we do. And then when you look at our different products, when you pick up our premium powder or our shower primer or our extreme cream, and you try to figure out what is it that these guys do, it doesn't take but a couple of seconds to have a pretty good idea, not only what we do, but why we believe we're better than the competition.
Got it. Now, how did you get into this industry? What's your background?
So my background's a little different. I actually owned and still own a successful full-service marketing agency called Level 6. And, as happens often, I regularly have people approach me with ideas. And sometimes it's just to bounce ideas off of me. And sometimes it's potentially to have me become a partner. And way back in 2010, can't believe it's been that long, my partners came to me and said, hey, we've got this idea for a new men's care line. One of the partners actually had worked in health and beauty. The other one had a sales background. So they certainly had a good, foundation there. And they said, we're thinking of getting into men's grooming. And I believe it was the shaving category. And they had a couple of unique selling propositions there. And they said, what do you think? And I replied immediately that, it sounds good, but that's a very, very competitive space. And it just so happened that I had for years had this idea as a body powder user myself, that there's got to be a way to make a better powder. So in that same conversation, I said, listen, if you would ever have any interest in making a better powder for guys, I not only do I think that's a great idea, but I would, like to become a partner with that. And it didn't take but a couple of minutes for them to think it over and say that's great. And then I guess the rest is history.
Do you see this happen often in your industry, in the marketing agency side, where people come and partner up with marketing agencies?
It's interesting. I don't know how often it happens to other folks, but I would say every year there's probably 3 or 4 opportunities for us to get involved. Some are direct, where people will come directly to us and say, we don't have the funds. Would you like to take an ownership stake? Some, they have the funds, and we just think it's such a home run idea that we'd like to become a part of it. But in all the years, I've owned the agency for about 13 years now. I've only done this, 3 or 4 times total. So it really takes a special situation, and none, I would say, and this is in all fairness to the other opportunities, which have also worked out well, but none have been as successful as Chassis. I mean, this has been, we thought we had something great on our hands, but it's definitely exceeded even our wildest expectations, and we couldn't be happier at the moment.
Got it. Now, so what does each side bring to the table between the marketing agency and the partner?
Yeah, so we've got, there's a handful of partners at this point. Flash forward a few years, we have an investor as well. But the 3 primary partners, and I was the most active one in the early years, by the way, because owning a marketing agency afforded me the ability to sort of take time out of my day and also start a men's grooming brand. So, while I wasn't full-time on it at the time, I was the only one who, had the ability to do that. My partners still, had full-time jobs at that point. But so obviously from a marketing standpoint, I've seen and done it all. I've seen what works. I've seen what doesn't work. And that, I think, certainly brought a lot to the table. Another partner, he came from consumer packaged goods and health and beauty, specifically online through e-commerce. So that was a perfect fit. And then the third partner comes with basically an entire career of sales experience at a very high level. So you combine the 3, it's a pretty good mix. And then obviously we've surrounded ourselves with not only great employees at this point, but of course lots of great partners that we work with as well.
Got it. Now, when you first started the brand, did you release all the products that we see today on the store, or what did you start with first?
Yeah, pretty much what you see today is we did shortly after launch, maybe a year after launch, we released an unscented version of our powder that's very popular. Our fragrance is clean and light and masculine, but a lot of guys were saying, when are you going to have an unscented version? And obviously, developing an unscented version of the same product is relatively simple. So that's out there. We're about to introduce a new product, and I guess I could probably talk about it at this point since this will air in a few weeks here, but it'll be called Chassis Premium Powder Ice, our ice formula. And basically it's just going to have 4 times the cooling action because believe it or not, a lot of guys like that. They like that cooling feeling down there, especially if they have any kind of discomfort. It sort of numbs the pain and kind of gives them a fresh feeling. So we have no idea how well this will do, but we've got hopes that it will do very well for us.
Got it. So you knew you wanted the products that you guys put out early on. Were you able to test this out with the market? How did you know that there was a demand for a product like this?
That's a great question. So long before we started Chassis, in fact, even before we started the company, the LLC, we wanted to first test our intuition that guys not only use powder, of course we knew that, being on sports teams and in college that a lot of guys use powder, but A, that they use it, and B, that they're looking for something better. And so we invested, a decent amount of money with a very reputable third-party panel company to do a panel study for us to validate those 2 questions. And what we found was it is true, that a lot of guys use powder. It's not all guys. It's not even a majority of guys, but it's still a pretty good percentage. And then there's also a group of guys who don't use powder, who are curious or who have discomfort down there and just don't even know about it. Because you have to remember, before chastity, really nobody talked about this. Guys, were using baby powder or medicated powder, and they were just sort of, using alternative products for a different use. And so, again, there's that group of guys who are like, well, yeah, I sweat down there and I wish there was something for me, but they had no idea there was even anything out there. And then there's a whole other group of guys who really have no problems. I mean, they're blessed, I suppose. They don't sweat down there. They don't have odor. They don't even know what the word chafing means. So, for those guys, obviously they're not a target, but that's okay. And, the example that I gave all along when we analyzed the data was I said, look, if you think about saline solution, which, I don't know if you wear contacts, but I do. And a good bottle of saline solution is, going to cost you almost $10 today. And, the percentage of people who wear contacts, I don't know how high it is, but let's just say it's 20% for argument's sake. Well, as a percentage of the general population, that's not great. But when you start to think about the raw count of how many people that is, I mean, you're talking about tens of millions of Americans who need your product. And so while, we are only for men and we are a niche and not for everybody, we're still something that's available to millions and millions of men. That I think that's part of our story, that not only was there a need, but we found a way to develop something through a lot of hard work, and that's a whole other story. But we were able to sort of crack the code and come up with something better.
So this panel study, this is something that I haven't heard other entrepreneurs on this podcast using to test the market. What goes into a panel study? What's involved?
Well, there's a lot of companies that do it. We're working with a company, a newer company for our most recent panel studies called Survata, and I believe it's Survata. They've been pretty good, and they've been very responsive. They can get these studies out quick. They'll tell you how many, what the size of the sample you need to receive certain confidence intervals. I'm not a statistician, by the way, but, that's what these companies are for. Are these as good as, getting 500 people that are thoroughly vetted to answer questions in a, multi-million-dollar study? Probably not. These aren't the kind of studies you would do to evaluate new medicines and pharmaceuticals or anything like that. But when you get a panel study and they have certain metrics that they look for, and they'll, you can say, I'm only looking for men between 18 and 65 or whatever it is that you're looking for in a given study. And then you develop your questionnaire. And they'll help you, in case there's any questions that are formatted incorrectly or what have you. And then you get your results. And the results, you can get them back as soon as really a couple of hours. Wow. So I wouldn't say it's cheap, but when you think about what you get for that, you really get a good roadmap, and it can help very quickly validate what it is that you're doing. Like I said, we're going through that now with a couple of new products that we're working on that I can't talk about yet, but what it's been really helpful for is to identify things like ingredients. We're asking the question now, what are some things that you don't want in these new products? And so we'll give them multiple choice and list off certain ingredients. And, just a quick one that's kind of funny. One of the options is GMOs, which of course everyone's saying they don't want in their food nowadays, if you go to Whole Foods or whatever. But what's funny is guys are now saying they don't want GMOs in their grooming products. So, I don't even know what that entails.
Slap the organic label on it, I guess.
Yeah, no, and organic, and that's another point too. Developing true organic products is very, very costly, and furthermore, the efficacy of an organic product in the health and beauty space is never going to be on par with other products. I mean, that's just a fact of the business. So you kind of have to kind of try to think about what are the worst offenders. The parabens and the sulfates and things like that people don't want, and you leave those ingredients out. But if you go truly all organic, number one, high cost of goods, but number two, in any kind of study where you're going to evaluate the actual efficacy, it's not going to compare. So really, I think what you're going to probably see is natural products or products claiming to be natural. Now, obviously, you've probably read too that natural, doesn't really mean anything. It means something, but it's not an official thing like organic. So, but I think that's where chassis fits. I mean, we knew what we didn't want. We knew we didn't want talc. We knew we didn't want parabens, menthol. Guys really didn't want menthol in the product, so we left that out of there as well. Aluminum. We left aluminum out. So, you go down the list and you can kind of think about those worst offenders and then develop a product that way. But these panel studies, long answer to your short question, they're incredibly valuable, and I can't recommend them enough.
Yes, it certainly sounds like it saves you time and then also lots of money on making sure you're not developing products or using ingredients that people don't want. And then those two coupled together give you the confidence to move forward. I think with, like you're saying, it is very invaluable. So what's the budget for something like this? Are we talking like 4 figures, 5 figures, 6 figures? Like how expensive can a panel study get?
It just depends on what you're looking for. I will say, I think the cost has actually come down, like a lot of things nowadays. Online. I think our first panel study back in 2010 actually cost a fair amount more than the most recent one we ran, which is kind of interesting. So almost 8 years later here. But we're talking, it could be as low as the hundreds of dollars. And it depends on how many questions and what sample size you're looking for. But it can get into the 4 figures, but I don't think, for most entrepreneurs, it's whatever it is, it's worth it. Let me just say that. And I think that to not do that with that ability to do a study, develop it, launch it, and get your results back in, say, 48 hours, that's an incredible thing that we wouldn't have had the ability to do a generation ago. In fact, really, if you really want to get philosophical about it, your entire podcast, our entire business model wouldn't have been possible a generation ago, and we're now selling internationally, around the world, and we're able to, tabulate different prices and different sales tax rules and, different shipping rules, and, it's all automated. None of this was possible a generation ago. So technology has really helped a lot of brands like Chassis do things that we never could have dreamed of.
So they collect these, they create the study and collect the panel. Is it all online? Is that how it works?
Yes, it's all online. There's different methodologies that they'll use. With the current company, Servata, that we're working with, they'll give you a couple different options, different price points, and how they collect it. It really just comes down to sample size at the end of the day, because you can argue, okay, did we get the age right? Did we get But what they know is they know the gender, they know the age, and then if you get the sample size large enough, like say north of 500, I believe, and don't quote me, you're talking about a 95%, I think, around confidence level at that point, and that's pretty significant. So you can argue, was this the right 500 people? But that's where these statisticians come up with their different sample size and the confidence levels, because it shouldn't matter if you have 500 people and there's a consensus. It really shouldn't matter. And I think that's where it gets exciting, right? Like one of the things that we're doing now is we're evaluating a product name, or I should say we recently evaluated a product name, and we put a bunch of product names out there. And I believe we did it to around 500 people in a panel. And there was one particular name that overwhelmingly tested better than the others. And we never could have guessed that. But when you have 500 guys that are answering a survey, and let's say there was, and I don't know the statistics, but there was around 8 names or something, and I believe that the number one name received over 40% of the first place votes. That's pretty overwhelming.
So it sounds like you designed the questions and then also gave them the demographic you wanted to target. What tips do you have here on how to design the right questions to ask in a panel? And then, we'll start there first, and I'll ask you about the demographics.
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to understand your audience, right? And I think that you can say, well, do we want to just say our target maybe is, like everyone's target today is say millennials, right? So I'm going to go, for argument's sake, 18 to 35, the coveted the group that everyone in media is trying to reach. Well, that's true. But when we look at who's buying chassis, it's all ages. And those ages really, run the gamut. They go, from 18 to, we have 80-year-olds buying chassis. Are they buying it at the frequency of, a 27-year-old? No, but they're still buying it. So what's nice about the online panel studies, in my opinion, is that oftentimes the age distribution will closely match the distribution of most target markets today, because in general you're going to have younger people online more. They're probably more likely to be incentivized to take a survey. And so when we get our results, and we just generally do, I think 18 to 65 or something like that, men, of course. The distribution of ages, closely approximates where we're getting our purchases from anyway. So it works out quite well. Now, obviously, if we were selling a geriatric product or something, then we would just say, okay, we only want men, 65 and up, or whatever it would be. So, and as far as the questions, I mean, really, it's what you want to ask. And I've found that you can't be vague about it. You just have to give specific questions. I mean, they can't be open-ended. In other words, there's no way to statistically validate an open-ended question, free response. So you've got to either have, multiple choice, multiple select, those sorts of things. And a good panel partner, they're going to give you everything you need in charts. You could take those charts and throw them right into a PowerPoint if you wanted to for partners or investors. And I think most importantly, if you're going to go through the trouble of doing these panel studies, make sure you follow through on it. I mean, if you're getting these great results, that kind of give you a roadmap, well, then you better follow that advice. Otherwise, what's the point in doing it?
What surprised you from this panel study? Were there any things that came back in the report from the panel that made you guys change the way you position the product or change the way you design the product?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was interesting. I can't get into too much details, but there was an ingredient, actually a series of ingredients that we were testing, not for the negative aspects, but for the positive aspects. So we had a separate question that was evaluating the types of ingredients they would want to appear in the product. And remember, we're not asking them to be chemists. We know that we're not asking a bunch of chemists here to evaluate this, but nevertheless, they're consumers. And so, what we put into the product does matter because they're the ones buying it. And so, again, we put, let's say 7 or 8, good ingredients that we were thinking about putting into this new product. And there was one ingredient that we threw in there sort of as a kicker because, frankly, it's kind of an old school ingredient that really doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. But what's amazing about it is that that's the one that tested number one. Mm-hmm. I never would have put it into the product, but it was so overwhelming that we're probably going to put it into the product just because, guys are looking for it. Is it a bad ingredient? Absolutely not. Does it have some positive attributes? Of course. Is it as effective as some of the other ingredients that we evaluated? No, not at all. Not even close. But we're probably going to put it into the product nevertheless because clearly, the guys spoke and they're looking for it.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about being flexible in that way where you can not only build the product that you want, you obviously have to make adjustments to make sure that it's a product that your customers want. I think a lot of times entrepreneurs get blinded and they're visionary, they have a vision in mind, they just go out and execute it, and sometimes it works, and usually we'll hear about those success stories, but most of the time it doesn't if you are not flexible and adapting to what your customers are asking for. So
and that's the big word. You hit it on the head, adapting. I mean, otherwise, why are you doing this? If you think you know everything, don't bother with a panel study. But if you think that your customer base has something to add in the product development and R&D phase, then not only A, do it, but B, heed their advice.
Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of experience in creating a brand, creating brands because of your marketing agency and now with Chassis. Well, what goes into creating a brand? I think this is a common almost like statement that people make where they say, okay, you have to create a brand to survive, you have to create a brand. But then how do you actually distill that down to actions that you have to take to make sure you are doing the activities necessary to create a brand?
Well, one thing that I always like to say is that really you have to flip it around and you have to say, what do you not want to be as a brand? I often find that that's a better way to approach it. So for example, with Chassis, not only are we a premium brand, we're a premium price, but we don't hide from that fact. So as a premium product, one of the ground rules that we have is we're not going to have sales. It's certainly not regular sales if we ever do. We're not going to have regular discounts because, again, if we're a premium product and all of a sudden we're going on sale every 5 days, are we really a premium product anymore at that point? So you have to kind of create those ground rules. I mean, right now we're a direct-to-consumer brand, like most of the people that are on this podcast. That's what we're doing. And I'll give you another example. We actually just this week signed a fairly important contract with a major retailer where in this situation, we're going to be going from a three-piece seller, which is what I think most probably of your guests are, to what's called a one-piece seller, where this particular retailer will be buying wholesale from us and then only selling online. That was one of our ground rules because, again, we want to stay in the e-com only space. But part of my rules of engagement here, again, the power of saying no, was that I was only going to do this deal if we had control over the price, specifically the bottom line lowest price that they could sell it for. And what we didn't want to do is go into a 1P relationship and all of a sudden you could buy it on this marketplace for less than you could buy it on other marketplaces. As soon as that happens, it's a race to the bottom. So I think that really, in my experience, creating a brand and creating a great brand name and a great logo and great tagline, all of that is important. And we could have a whole separate interview just on that alone. But what's really important is preserving that brand once it's created. I mean, that's the hard part.
Got it. And the idea of setting these boundaries where you want your brand to exist within and not to cross into an area that you do not want your brand to be in. How do you keep that? How does this enforcement work when you have a company, when there's multiple people working on it? How do you make sure everyone is on brand?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think first and foremost, I'm very lucky that my partners allow me to sort of be the keeper of the brand. I think given my other job as a owner of a marketing agency, they kind of just get out of my way on that side. I can't do a lot of the things they do. And, we've got a guy, Peyton, who is our international guy. In the last year, he's gotten us to be a true international brand. And I don't mean just shipping from the United States. We're talking, different bottles with translations and different versions of our websites and different marketplaces and, all these different VAT import fees. I mean, I don't even understand this stuff. That's left brain stuff. That's way out of my wheelhouse. But I understand a brand. So I think, it's really part of a bigger question from an organizational standpoint. Obviously, we're still not a huge company, but with the handful of people that we have running the show, everyone knows what their role is. And when it comes to branding, when it comes to pricing, when it comes to any of those sorts of decisions, ultimately, I've kind of been the keeper of that. Mm-hmm. And we're a great team. We all get along. And I really don't think that I can't even remember one time where we've ever had an impasse or a fight or an argument. We all respect each other's abilities and what we bring to the table, and it just works great.
Yes, I think at this scale, the communication aspect of it is obviously very important. And then it sounds like you kind of roll up the big brand decisions up to just one decision maker, and it's you in this case, so that doesn't get diluted between multiple people. And it's obviously working for you at this scale. Now, another piece of the brand is with the packaging. I really like the way that the product is packaged. How did you get that designed and made?
Wow. Yeah, we've got, holy cow, where do I start with that? So first of all, let me just say we had a former employee. She's actually our very first employee a few years back, right before we launched. And we were almost ready to go to market. And, everything was ready. The formula was ready. We were just going through some final testing. And on day one, she did about the bravest thing that any employee can ever do. And she told me that she thought our packaging sucked. I don't think she used those words exactly, but she said, look, if you're going to sell this for $18, does this really look like an $18 package to you? And, I thought about it and it was interesting because one of the things that I realized in that process, by the way, and this is a little bit of an aside, but if you look at premium products in many industries, but specifically in health and beauty and grooming, you'll find that the simpler the design, the higher end the product. And the more extravagant with metals and shadows and gradients and all these different things that are going on, those tend to be your lower end mass retail brands. And it's a little counterintuitive, but certainly that was the case. In fact, I can see it. I still have our original package that never launched sitting on my shelf. It objectively looks fine, and if it was sitting there on the shelf at Walmart, it looks great. If it was sitting there next to Old Spice or Right Guard or something like that, I don't think anyone would have a problem with it. But if it were sitting on a shelf next to higher end brands, it absolutely did not look the part. And so it was a valuable lesson. I'm eternally grateful for her saying something on day one. And then obviously, that added to the cost of goods, because to have a premium package will do that. But, again, if you're a premium product, you got to walk the walk. And I think that's what we were able to do. And I appreciate the feedback on that.
Mm-hmm. And so did you have a designer work on it? Like, what was the process for creating it? This iteration, at least.
Yeah, my graphic designer on the level 6 side actually does most of the work for chassis. He's fantastic. And so, we worked with him, Chris, he's a superstar, and he put that together. And we have a packaging supplier that we work with. They're great. They've provided a lot of good options for us. I think it was kind of funny. We kept checking every box. We wanted 2 color instead of 1 color. We wanted, custom colors, and we wanted custom caps and custom this and custom that. We were warned that it was adding to the cost, but I think at that point we were committed. Again, we have to walk the walk. If we're a premium product, we've got to look premium. At the end of the day, we're talking, a few pennies per package for each of these decisions. Not that significant in the scheme of things. So we just went with it.
Yeah, I like that exercise that you guys did, at least mentally, where you place your product next to products that exist in the same category, and does it seem like it would be as valuable or ideally more valuable than the products that it's sitting next to. So that's an important exercise to do. Even if you're not selling necessarily inside a retail store, it can exist in someone's mind that way. So I think that's an important exercise that
Absolutely.
You guys went through. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing you mentioned as well was about YouTube as a way that you've been able to drive attention to your brand. Talk to us about that. How have you been using YouTube and YouTubers?
Well, that's I can't say enough about YouTube for our brand. I don't know that it would work for every brand, but for what we do, especially when you're having to explain to potentially an entire generation of guys, not only what is a chassis, but specifically why they should be using powder. It's an eye opener, and I think that. The nice thing about a men's product is the amount of influencers is far less than it would be for a women's product. Obviously, I mean, if you just look at it, it probably closely mirrors the actual annual revenue of health and beauty for women versus men. But really, you're only talking about a dozen or so really impactful influencers that are out there. And so, we're working with some of the biggest ones that are out there. They do a great job for us. They're an extension of our brand. In the beginning, we had to thoroughly vet every word they said. And as time goes on, the more we work with them, we allow them a little bit more flexibility. They know the things they can say and the things they can't say about our brand. And, overall, it's just something that what I love about it the most, I think, is that it's always working for us. Yes, you're going to see the most impact the day that a video launches, because that's the day that the most the views are going to happen. But every day, every one of these videos that we've developed is capturing more and more views. And it just feels good to know that even though we may not have launched a video this week or even this month potentially, there's still views happening every single day across the world. And more people are finding out about Chassis, and that's a pretty cool feeling.
So do they review the brand? Like what's the kind of content that they're creating for Chassis?
Yeah, first of all, we will not do a video with anybody until they try our product. And we really want this to be authentic, because if they don't believe that we are the best, product, specifically the best powder for guys, then we don't want them doing it for us. And so, because otherwise it's not authentic. They're it's just a terrible infomercial at that point. And so, anybody who works with us, even before they do, they're going to get the samples and they're going to tell us, what they think, what they like, what they don't like. Is this something that they would use? I'll be honest, there's a few times where we didn't like what we heard or we didn't believe them. It wasn't believable. And we've said, we're going to pass on this opportunity. So, for us, authenticity is critical, not only in the talent themselves, but how they feel about chassis. I mean, that you got to have that. If you don't have that, there's really no sense in doing influencer marketing.
So what's the process? You send out the product to an influencer, and then you first have a conversation with them to see if they actually try the product, if they actually appear passionate enough. Like, what's the setup, I guess, before the video happens?
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, first of all, we're constantly looking at influencers, new ones. We're evaluating a couple right now, in fact, to see if they're general tone fits with our brand. And if it does, we'll reach out to either them or their representatives and say, we're interested in potentially working with you. Usually we'll have an initial conversation, which is immediately followed by us sending them a full line of our samples. And then we'll follow up, see what they think, see if they think this fits with them, see if, how they genuinely feel. And we'll look to see if they're understanding what chassis is. I mean, it's not a Me Too product. We worked very, very hard to make sure that this wasn't a Me Too product. And if their reaction, smells like somebody who's not believing it and not understanding it, then we'll walk the other way. Because if they can't make us believe it, then how are they going to make, millions of Americans believe it?
And one other thing you mentioned was that they have to be the right kind of YouTuber so they can actually have leverage in influencing their viewers. And I think this is important because I think you can look for two different YouTubers and they both appear to be in the same category, that they're 18, 35-year-old men, this demographic, but one can be more influential than the other. What's the difference? Like, what's the key to someone being more influential than another when you're looking at YouTubers for your influencer marketing?
That's a great question. So for us, what we found, I call it the best friend or older cousin. So it goes like this. For us, what we found is that if we work with influencers who not only maybe they are young or they look young, they are not very effective for us. We have tried a few guys, in fact, one in particular who's not young, but he looks like he's 12 years old. And we did a huge video with him, pretty big budget, and it did nothing for our brand at all. And of course, hindsight is 20/20. And again, this is going to vary depending on your brand. But for our brand, I call it the older cousin. So they don't want to hear from their dads, but they want to hear from their older cousin. So it's like that half a generation up is what we find works really well. So there's another influencer that we work with who does a great job for us, who happens to be very young. I mean, he's in his early 20s, but he looks much, much older. He looks older, acts older. I would think the average viewer probably would suspect he's in his early to mid 30s, in fact. And as such, he does great for us. But again, there's other influencers, if they're just too young, I don't think they don't have the credibility factor probably that a lot of the young viewers are looking for.
Yeah, so it's like they might have the same demographic, but the viewer doesn't relate to them in the same way where they are. That looks like someone does just like me, or someone that's around that has my life experience. They might be following them, and they might fall into the demographic that exists for you. But if the YouTuber is talking about your product, but then they can't see themselves in that YouTuber's shoes, then they're probably not going to be influential.
That's exactly right.
Got it. And so you mentioned that when you're first starting off, and I think this is an important point for anyone else that wants to take the same strategy, you have to be a little more hands-on with the kind of messaging that you want the influencer to put out there. What kind of guidance can you give an influencer, whether it be on YouTube or anywhere else, to make sure that it kind of ticks the right boxes for you?
Well, first and foremost, we start with, okay, it's pronounced chassis, not chassis or something
right.
like that, right? So it starts there. But really from there, it just goes down to talking about why we're better than the other options that you have out there, why we're healthier, than the other options that are out there. And most importantly, we don't want to be lowbrow. For us, back to that whole power of no, our line in the sand is our tagline. Man care for down there is really as humorous as we want to get. If it's any, funnier or more goofy, sophomoric, whatever adjective you want to use, that's the kind of stuff that we're going to walk away from because, there are a few other brands out there that compete with us. I don't necessarily think their formula is as good, number one, but more importantly, they're all going for that sort of lowbrow humor, that sophomoric humor. And that's okay. I think there's a place for that, but that's not what we are. That's not what the Chassis brand is.
Got it. So when I was doing some research on you guys, I found the Amazon listings for you, and you guys are selling a bunch on Amazon, lots of reviews on Amazon. What's that experience been like so far?
Well, it's interesting. I was at a big conference, actually a men's conference in the lifestyle space a couple of months ago, and there was a lot of other brands there that were sponsoring, and we got to talking. And what's interesting is that we've kind of had a two-pronged approach from day one. We of course wanted to have our own Shopify store and grow that as much we could, but we also wanted to recognize how powerful Amazon is. I mean, at the end of the day, if you ignore Amazon, you're ignoring half of all e-commerce in the United States. But what's interesting is that a lot of these other brands were doing that. And they had a whole bunch of reasons why they thought that was a good idea, specifically that, you don't really own your customer on Amazon. You can't really market to them on Amazon. And that's absolutely true. Your CRM opportunities on Amazon are not, obviously as good as they would be on your Shopify store. However, I mean, I can just tell you, the conversion percentage on Amazon is high, and it's, very high compared to our Shopify store. Our Shopify store has great conversion. Don't get me wrong. I would probably put it up against any other Shopify store out there. But it's even higher on Amazon. And I think that, makes sense when you think about buyer behavior. I mean, you've got, 100 million plus, I don't know what the latest number is, Prime accounts. And remember, that's just accounts. That's not individuals. So you're talking, probably a few 100 million Americans have access to a Prime account, which already has all your information stored. It has all your credit card stored. So literally with a single click or just saying something to Alexa, you can buy the product. So, from that standpoint, of course, the conversion is going to be higher on Amazon. And so, what we absolutely still want is we want a great experience on Shopify. If you'd rather buy on Shopify, go for it. Shopify is going to give you a much better experience when it comes to the flexibility in selling your product, videos and different views and explanations. And, it's a much, much better showroom, I guess is a way to put it, objectively than Amazon would ever be. And, and we can see that. We can see how many people start on the Shopify site and then decide, I'd rather just buy it on Amazon. And that's fine, and we're happy to do that. So, we don't play favorites. At the end of the day, we're trying to make money here. And Amazon's been great. People have responded, amazingly to it. You mentioned the number of reviews, and it's important to note that that's just over 2 years worth of reviews. And that's in a niche category that's, pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think one thing you touched on was that there is this legitimate shopper profile that is the Amazon shopper that will only buy on Amazon, and they won't go anywhere else to buy it, even if it exists elsewhere. They'll go to Amazon first, and if it's there, they're going to buy first, even if they're going to pay a slight premium or they just know to go. It's like a well-trodden path for them in terms of buying things online, and they'll stick with Amazon. So like you're saying, if you don't sell on Amazon, you could lose out on those shoppers that are only buy on Amazon. They're just Amazon buyers. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the Shopify site, can you talk to us about the design behind that? Like how did you guys get the site built?
Well, this is already version 2 of our site, which, makes sense because we're a couple years into it. And, even with our clients on the agency side, we try to push to at least freshen up your site every couple of years. Chris, our designer, did a great job with that. He's actually learned some pretty amazing Shopify skills during the process as well. Got to give him credit for that as well. But when you look at the site, I mean, I think it's definitely a premium looking site. It's clean, which again, lends itself to that, cleaner look, tends to be a little bit higher end, generally speaking. And really, we just wanted something that sold our story, sold our products, obviously, and gave people the option to buy it however they wanted to buy it. And it's been a great place. I just got the stats earlier today. I mean, the traffic increase on our site, over the last year, just on our site alone, I think from what I was told, it's almost triple the amount of daily visitors that we're getting this year compared to last year. I mean, that's pretty staggering.
So you said this is version 2. Did you come into this redesign with certain elements or certain goals in mind in creating a new version of the website design?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I believe what we did before, part of the reason it prompted it was we needed more features from Shopify. We had to, I think before we were probably using a WordPress site with a Shopify plugin. In fact, yeah, that's what we were doing. I had to think back a few months here. And so when we decided that, hey, we got to go full Shopify now, we got to get more features out of this, that prompted us to say, okay, well, let's just give it a different look. It's time, maybe it's a little on the early side, being, just a couple of years into this, but no, it's worked well. Our conversion is up with the new design, and our traffic is certainly up. So anybody who thinks that Shopify can't rank from an SEO standpoint is wrong, because it's only gone up, with the new platform.
I like that you have this under the hood section too, which I believe breaks down a lot of the ingredients, or maybe all the ingredients that are going into the product. What did you have this in the first version of the site? So like, what made you guys decide to have this particular page not only exist on the site but also be in top navigation?
Yeah, we did. I mean, it's interesting. We're a premium product, but we really do have premium ingredients. When our chemists told us that he could do this, and remember, I mean, we went through a lot of trial and error with Chassis. We went through, I think, 3 different chemists before we finally found somebody who could do what we wanted. Because you got to remember, the health and beauty industry is very derivative. That's just how it works. And I don't know if people are aware of what I mean by that, but basically, most of what you're picking up on the shelf starts with another product. So it starts with saying, okay, I like this shampoo or this deodorant, but I want to make this tweak to it. And that's really how most of the products evolve. So it's more of an evolutionary process. And, the other side of it that's interesting is that usually what happens is you work with a contract manufacturer with their own in-house chemists. And these in-house chemists are basically going to come with a pretty good offer. They're going to say, we could do it, either for free or a very low cost to develop your product. But the caveat is that you don't own that formula. That formula is technically owned by that contract manufacturer. And so, unfortunately, I think most people out there probably believe that that's the only way to develop health and beauty, because that's really how the vast majority of it is developed. But at the 11th hour, when we were ready to give up, we realized that the contract manufacturers, frankly, at least the ones that we were working with, I don't want to disparage all of them, but the ones we were working with did not have the talent to develop a revolutionary product, a ground-up product that was truly something new. I then worked the phones and called all over the world to try to find somebody, and I got a name of a guy who was an in-house chemist for a lab, but also freelanced and was willing to, we were able to work a deal where, he developed it for us, but we own the formula. And I think that, that gives us the flexibility, not that we don't love our contract manufacturers that we are working with. They're awesome. They do a great job, but it's nice to know that we own that IP. And, I was listening to a podcast recently with a company that sold for several $100 million in the beauty space that admitted on, in the interview that they didn't own their own formula, but still sold the company for hundreds of millions of dollars. And I thought that was fascinating, that it's just generally accepted that that's how the business works. But in our case, we had to go a different route, and, it was worth the extra effort to get there. And back to your original question, under the hood is a way for us to really highlight some of those superstar ingredients that we have that you're not going to find in a typical product.
Got it. So on the rest of the site, are there any other applications that you guys use either on your Shopify site or just to help you run the business in general?
Yeah, we use a lot. I don't know what the norm is for your listeners out there and how many
Yeah, they'll
plugins
love to
there are.
hear. So yeah, tell us all the ones that you like.
Yeah, I'll tell you some of our favorite ones. I mean, altogether, we're probably got over a dozen that we're using. But some of the best ones, for cart abandonment. I don't know if you guys ever talk about cart abandonment on the show, but we use Abandonment Protector Plus. There's a lot of cart abandonment tools out there. I don't know which one. I don't know if the one we're using is the best, but it's working fine, and it more than pays for itself. It's a subscription, but every day it's recovering sales that we would have lost, by allowing people to click and go right back to their cart and finish the transaction. So that's a really cool one that we like to work with. We found Stamped.io. I don't know if you guys have talked about that before, but we use them as a layer above the Shopify reviews. So Stamped.io kind of plugs in over top of the Shopify review system. And that combination has just been awesome for us. Specifically, I think what I like the best about it is it allows customers to review directly from an email. So they don't have to log in, go through this laborious process. They can just, open an email, click a couple buttons, and their review is submitted. That's a very cool feature. And then, I'd say most importantly, as we've now evolved into a true international company, we were faced with, do we have a different website for every country? And then how do we manage all those different websites? That was daunting because, we have different bottles now. We have a French bottle, we have a German bottle, we have a British bottle, we have a French-Canadian bottle, and on and on. But what we found that works real well is a plugin called Langify. And Langify, basically allows us to create different versions of our site, with different subdomains, depending on where the person's country is from. So, and then the other cool app that we plugged on top of that is one called Geolyzer. And what Geolyzer does is and it works really great with Langify, is in the event that Google didn't send you to your country's version of our site or subdomain, which it should, but if, let's say, it wasn't indexed correctly or whatever, it will recognize that you're from Germany and say, in German, we recognize that you're in Germany. Would you like to go to the German version of our site? And then you click a button and it just takes you right to it. So, those two together, I mean, the efficiencies that we can realize in growing internationally with those two have just been awesome.
That's cool that you just install a couple apps and now you have an international exposure for your marketing. So that's great.
And take nothing away from the hard work behind the scenes. I mean, the amount of regulations, sure. And that's it's interesting because I've actually been thinking lately, why is it that so many really well-known brands, household names, are not sold internationally, outside of, drop shipping from the United States? And I think really, in my opinion, it just comes down to regulations and not from a political standpoint or anything else. I mean, in America, it's pretty easy to launch a product. There's not a lot of rules and regulations here. I mean, no matter what you hear on the news, it's pretty easy. But if you want to sell in health and beauty in Canada and in the EU, there are all sorts of hurdles and regulations and safety things that you have to pass in order to do that. It's not easy. It takes a lot of fortitude. It's a lot of hard work. I mean, I can't tell you how many legal forms we've had to sign over the last year or so in order to make this all happen. But you're right. Once that hard work is done, and we found these apps, it made it really easy to get the job done from our Shopify site.
Yeah, very cool. So if anyone that wants to check it out, it's chassisformen.com. It's spelled ChassisFormen.com. So there are more products coming out as we speak, as you're launching new products this year. What other goals do you have for the remainder of the year?
Well, really, I think our number one goal is, just to dovetail what I was just speaking about, is we want to grow internationally. So now we are officially an international brand, but we've got to start converting. We are every day. It's growing. We just had our best day ever in Canada just yesterday, in fact. So we just want to see that momentum continue to grow, and then obviously keep the American momentum as well. But I just think that for all of the listeners that are listening, if you have a Shopify site or any kind of e-commerce presence, or you're thinking about it, just think about the rising tide that we're all on, right? I mean, everything on e-commerce is growing at a pace that is, fairly astronomical at this point. And if you look at all the economics reports, there's no end in sight. So the funny thing is, if you can just, hitch a ride on this wave and not even do anything, you're going to grow. So that's a pretty cool thing to say. And, we're happy to be a part of this ride.
That's cool. Great advice. Again, thank you so much for your time, Ben.
Glad to be on the show. Thanks so much, Felix.
Here's a sneak peek for what's in store in the next Shopify Masters episode.
So we ended up making probably 15 different 3D printed models before it was all said and done, and we had kind of the one we liked.
Thanks for listening to Shopify Masters, the e-commerce marketing podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs. To start your store today, visit shopify.com/masters to claim your extended 30-day free trial. Also, for this episode's show notes, head over to shopify.com/blog.